wants to ask, what do you do when something can't be healed? It can't be fixed, it can't be cured. So I am so excited to introduce our author and advocate, Brianna Greenspan, to be able to jump in not only to her new book, but also to her journey of using neuroscience and asking great questions. So, Brianna, welcome today. I'm so excited to have you on to talk about all things in your world.
Hi, Julia. It's such a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Well, we have met through some mutual friends and high achieving women. Tune in because your journey is not dictated by your diagnosis. Not in my world, not in Brianna's world. And that doesn't stop you from doing amazing, amazing things. So, Brianna, real quickly, let's just dive right in. What is the thing that medicine couldn't fix for you? And what did you do when you realized that there wasn't a prescription or a single intervention that would just make things go back to normal or the way they were?
Hmm, what a beautiful question. And ultimately, I was born with a complex chronic illness. And so I never stopped crying until I could talk. And by the time I could, I was constantly complaining, which sent us to so many specialists, which eventually led to so many different labels and so many different diagnoses. And the whole time, I was consistently sitting in a space of suffering. It didn't matter how many labels or medications or assistive devices or therapies I tried, the things weren't giving me the relief that I was hoping for. And ultimately, I spent the first 20 years of my life in this cycle of searching for something to support what ultimately I learned was a progressive connective tissue disorder that there is no cure for. There is no magic pill. There is no, something that can make it all go away. And that really changed the trajectory of how I showed up for myself and how I show up now, learning how to navigate every symptom that appears.
Wow. And so fast forward, first 20 years was kind of like chasing. And then it sounds like there was some knowledge and revelation. Take us to what it was like for you to get through the other side of being able to label it. And then also saying, what does it look like for you to thrive, to flourish, to contribute to science and thought leadership in the ways that you have?
It's such an interesting one. I always talk about my illness to wellness journey. The first 20 years of my life were so incredibly complicated. And actually, by the time I was 20, I had lost the ability to walk after a failed L5S1 fusion surgery, which was supposed to be the culmination and like the answer to a lot of the things I was suffering with. But it ultimately took things into a much darker space. And I was a sophomore in college. I'd lost the ability to walk. I had, they golf carted me to class on campus and I parked in a handicapped spot. And when I flew home to see the neurosurgeon for my follow-up appointment, I was in the darkest space of my life. And I ultimately told my parents, it hurts to breathe. It hurts to go to the bathroom. It hurts to do things that used to hurt, but in a whole nother way. And I said to them, if the neurosurgeon doesn't have any good answers tomorrow, do I even want to live anymore? And that was a very limiting question. And it was very hard for me to say that, but it was also very hard for my parents to hear that. And ultimately the next day I woke up and I got a phone call from my roommate in college, and he told me that one of our dear friends had OD'd and died and passed away that night. Like I had just seen him the day before, and I flew home to see this neurosurgeon, and I wake up, in the desperation and loneliness and isolation that I was feeling to this phone call, and now I'm feeling so many additional emotions that I didn't know how to process. And then I went to the neurosurgeon. And it was at that appointment that he said, I actually don't really have any good answers for you. I can up your steroid shot. I can upgrade your handicap placard from a temporary one to a permanent one. And I can prescribe you another pain medication. And then he prescribed me the medication my friend had just died from. And that was it. I literally lost it. And I asked a different question. I said in my head and out loud, is there anything else that can help me with the way that I'm suffering? And if so, where can I find it? And ultimately, that was the question that catalyzed all of my curiosity, that catalyzed me researching the neuroscience of well being, learning about frameworks, practices, modalities, rituals, therapists, mentors, that I tried so many things as a child and adolescent, but all these new things magically appeared that I'd never even heard of. And that really, over time, really made a massive difference in my life.
And it started with that just simple question, kind of what we opened with and rephrasing. And I think that that's maybe something we often don't think about enough is how do you look at the problem in a different way? So it's not what's in the box or out of the box thinking. It's are we so zoomed in on the only option and the only answer being cure? How do we zoom out and step back and say, what of all the things that are available to us do we know or do we not know? So, can you talk a little bit about some of the discoveries that you've contributed to and some of the ways that you've helped other people maybe ask these unanswerable questions?
Yes. It first started with myself just asking that question and noticing what came up. And then I started asking different questions like, how can I be a steward of support in my hardest times? Are there different things that I could be doing to help myself? And that was really a game changer when I started to evaluate the ways in which a symptom would come up and how I'd show up. For instance, um, I have some autonomic issues and sometimes I'll faint. And the moment I started asking myself, how can I be a steward of support? Or my favorite question, which is the first question in my new book, The Book of Questions Living with Chronic Illness, despite how I'm feeling in this exact moment, what can I do to best support myself starting now? And once I started asking that question, when I'd feel I'm about to faint, I'd sit down instead of letting myself faint and maybe hitting my head and hurting myself and having other ramifications from this situation. And what I learned is that there are times that we're the only person who could be a steward of support to ourselves. And it's often the conversation that's happening in our mind right before or right when a symptom appears. And so I've been able to start inserting certain questions or certain language to help me to orient towards the things that I know that can help myself. And
Oh, I
that led
love that.
to,
Oh, I love that so much. And I'm a mom of 5, and I have 2 kids that are impulsive, to say mildly, and they always are hearing me say, "Think before you act." And when I saw that question, I thought, what an intentional way, not just in childhood and in elementary school, but as an adult to really sit back and say, to best support myself in that moment. You've got to connect the body with the thinking and stop that impulse. And in my world of, think before you spend, we want to apply that same question is what's the best thing I can do to support myself right now? And so I love how practical it is, but multidisciplinary in that idea of book of questions. So talk us through maybe one more of those questions that's in your new book.
so that is the first of what I call the 4 daily questions. And the second daily question that I use regularly is, what are the tools and resources that best support me in my time of need? And where can I place them so I have them when I need them? And this has been such a fascinating thing for me personally because I'm always thinking about when that symptom appears, what is the thing that can help me? When that thing spontaneously shows itself, how might I help myself? Because in my childhood, I was solely focused on what was outside of my control. And truthfully, when you have a complex chronic illness that is not going away, no matter what things you are doing to support yourself, there's a lot of things that are outside of your control. There's also a lot of things that you might not be able to change. And when I was solely focusing on those things felt hopeless and things felt so out of reach, and that like I had no ownership in how I was feeling. And on the flip side of that, once I started noticing that there were a lot of things that were in my control, can I take a deep breath? Can I sit down? Can I get some water? Can I ask for a need to be met? And in what ways? That started showing me that there were small things that were inside of my control, even though there were so many things spiraling that were outside of my control. And I became hyper focused on taking ownership of what I was capable of controlling. And that really was a paradigm shift, if you will.
Oh, I love that, and I don't hear that this was this big, huge, heavy lift. This to me was more like this micro action of little tiny habits, and I know you're all about habits. So talk to me about how this kind of plays out, and where would you see
I
people
have that much
applying
energy.
these questions in your world?
That's exactly right. I call it micro massive action. I don't have that much energy every day. And as a result, there's only so much that I personally can do to support myself in hard times. And so I'm often thinking about how do I set myself up for success? Like if I know I'm going to sit for a long time, am I going to put water on my desk so that I stay hydrated? If I know that I get cold easily, am I going to bring a sweater so I'm not hurting? If I know something might come in the future, are there things that I'm doing now to potentially prepare? And that has been a whole strategy for myself that it wasn't a heavy lift. It was just one tiny little thing and one tiny little thing. And then the noticing of that, and then the continuation of that. And it's been a real gift that I've been able to give to myself. And now mentoring kids and teens with chronic and terminal illnesses and working in medical genetics and writing neuroscience children's books, I've learned so much about how all of us can support ourselves in unique ways if we knew that that was even a possibility.
Wow, and I love the idea that it doesn't stop with you. I'm sensing a bit of abundance that now that your cup is full, you're able to overflow and maybe pour into those other people around you. And sometimes I think that is maybe an assumption that people make about chronic illness is it's a victim mindset or it's the label, it's the diagnosis. And I love the perspective to say it is not limited to that. It is so much more because you, as a person, as an author, as a scientist, and a researcher, are now contributing at kind of the global and international stage. So talk to me a little bit about this like chronic illness crisis that we're having and how do you see it affecting, not just parents and moms, but just teens and kids. Like, oh my goodness, like I don't even know which direction to point it, but when you say global crisis, we talked about the opioid pandemic through earlier overdoses. I'm assuming that that's what it was related to, but I just am curious, what are you seeing and what keeps you up at night when it comes to this global chronic illness crisis?
Oh, we could have 10 hours of conversation on this topic. And the thing is, post COVID, we've seen so many people that are feeling physiologically or mentally unwell. We're seeing people that don't have the support that they need. And we're seeing people that are often spiraling downward because they do not literally have the framework, supports, rituals, practices, resources, mentors, therapists, guides that are needed for these hard moments that ultimately the whole population is feeling. And so this has been a really heavy time for me personally because I was on that side. I did feel like a victim. Why me? Why does it hurt so much? Why is this happening? As a child, I was very aware that I was different very early on because I suffered a lot and I had to miss a lot of school. And by third grade, I was told by my peers that that wasn't ideal. So they started an I Hate Brianna club in third grade, letting me know that like sick wasn't well received. And that really stuck with me because I learned that different wasn't well received. I was different. And it took many, many years for me to learn how that actually played out and expressed itself. And so when we talk about the chronic illness crisis of today, I'm hearing stats that are so staggering that it used to be like 1 in 10 or 2 in 10. And now the stats are so staggering that almost every person, I guarantee almost every person who's listening to this today either has a chronic illness, loves someone with a chronic illness, or is currently caring for someone with a chronic illness. Like your neighbor, your cousin, your
Wow.
friend, your niece, your coworker, your child, you. And that's what I'm hearing every day, that someone's suffering at a grand level and they don't know the language to orient themselves to support what's capable of being supported in those hard moments.
Wow. And the book of questions really would give them the tools. We talked about two of the questions. We talked about, you know, as a resource and as a tool, how it's available. I'm curious more about how does it play into your daily routine? And what's the importance of having a routine despite all these other challenges and things that life, I say, is a four-letter word sometimes, and it comes at you whether you like it or not. And how are you having success within your day when maybe it can be defined in so many different ways?
Yes. Well, the thing is, I'm constantly looking for little wins. For instance, if I woke up and I couldn't stand, and now today I wake up and I can stand, I'm really grateful. If I went to bed yesterday and it hurt to breathe, and I woke up today and I had a little relief, I'm really grateful. And so, what I've noticed is that anytime something isn't easy, walking, seeing, talking, eating, things that are optimal for functioning, in society, I will be super grateful when that is available and super mindful when it's not. And so I've started to navigate my life in a way that I'm celebrating micro wins. I'm celebrating, these moments where if you're not able to go out to a restaurant with your friends and keep food down, and then you're able to go out to a restaurant and keep food down, oftentimes that's a moment to celebrate. And what I've noticed is that most people are moving right past their moments. And so I give myself 5, 10, 15, 20 seconds or a little bit more to just say, like, wow, I couldn't do that last week. And I'm so proud of myself in this moment. And I give myself that additional reinforcement of celebration or reflection or honor or grace if and when needed, because I never did that ever one time in my whole life, the first 20 years of my life. It was constantly like I was putting myself down. I was unimpressed. I was like, you really missed the mark. The narrative in my mind was not supportive to me moving through the challenges I was having. And what I've learned from these questions is how they can be a resource in your hard moments. And here's a perfect example. As a child, I had a lot of challenges with throwing up, and I went to school and we carpooled. So picture this: I feel nauseous, it's 7 a.m., there's a car full of 7 people, you know exactly where this is going. And I feel sick, and I'm not able to either communicate or resource myself or help myself in those ways. So maybe I've now thrown up on the car or out the window or on myself or whatever the fill in the blank. It's not good. And it creates a lot of chaos. So the other day, I just had this situation. This was like 2 weeks ago. I was meeting my friend Kim. I was supposed to get in her car in a parking lot. I'm on the phone with our friend who connected us. True story. And the moment I get in my friend Kim's car, I sit down and I realize I have about 12 seconds before I throw up.
Hmm.
That's starting now. And I say, hold on. I put the phone down. I turn to my friend. I said, please stop the car. I get out. I grab my hair. I start throwing up. And then I say the question again in my mind. Despite how I'm feeling in this exact moment, what can I do to best support myself starting now? I turn back to my friend. I said, hey, do you have a napkin? I need some electrolytes. She hands me this water that I had in my purse. She hands me my electrolytes that are in my purse. I take them. And what transpired? That moment was a moment where, when I was a child, that moment was the day. it would be, I now have to go home, I have to change clothes, my rib hurts, now my throat hurts, I need to go to the doctor, and what's happening, and can she eat her next meal? And ultimately, that moment was just a moment with my friend, and then we had a wonderful day, and it didn't affect the rest of the situations that took place. And I noticed that when I ask myself these powerful questions regularly, I'm able to release some of the held trauma that I had as a result of these types of symptoms coming out in weird ways. And I've noticed that I've been able to find a lot of psychological safety from within. I don't feel uncomfortable in my own skin in the ways that I used to as a result of living with a chronic illness.
Wow, that is such a powerful story because both characters played a role, right?
Yes.
You were around people that kind of not just knew what to expect, but normalized. They weren't adding to this compounded or held trauma. You have now applied these kind of tools, like new chapters are beginning, new conversations are beginning. And I love how you said it's that internal mindset. It's how you talk to yourself, it's how you perceive the things around you. And, I see that a lot with the gratitude, the importance of gratitude. And in the world of money and in a world of comparison, someone's always going to have more than you. Elon will probably have a $2 trillion compensation package instead of one someday. There will always be somebody with less than you. And so I say the prescription or like the antidote for like entitlement of I deserve this or I don't deserve this. The antidote's really gratitude. And I love how that came out for you in just the small micro moments, the small mindset, and what an amazing gift this book is going to be. This resource, November 17th is the magic
Yes.
day. Tell us
Yes.
about it. Tell us how we can not just support you, but maybe support one of those people that we're caring for that we know or are ourselves that need this book. Tell me, when we launch November 17, what is the best way to get this book into as many hands as possible? Because you already covered it that everybody listening has a way to know of somebody about a chronic illness. So, how can we support you during this launch, but also support you in your journey of writing? Because this isn't your first book. I'm assuming it won't be your last.
You're so cute. So there's so many ways. The Book of Questions, Living with Chronic Illness, comes out November 17th. There is a pre-order link below, and it is in the notes also. And ultimately, you can go to bookofquestions.com if you're interested in learning a bit more, buying them in bulk for a support group, for a hospital, for any kind of community that you are a part of where people are suffering mentally or physically. And we'd love to learn how we can best support the communities that you serve. Because the truth is, this is a labor of love that I've been studying the neuroscience of well-being for decades and trying to figure out, how do I support myself? How do I support others with chronic illness? And I learned that the questions we ask ourselves are so empowering and vital. And so I collaborated with the original author of the Book of Questions, Dr. Gregory Stock, for us to write the Book of Questions, Living with Chronic Illness. And if there are any ways that anyone who heard this thinks that book might be a resource for those that are suffering, we'd love to help in any way.
I love that so much. And so, talk us through what's maybe something we wouldn't know about the book or the book writing process, or something we wouldn't know about what it's like to co-author. I'm curious if you can give me some behind the scenes tea. Can you tell I have teenagers? Some behind the scenes context as we kind of wrap up today.
So being a co-author is such an interesting thing and very different than being a regular author, because if you're a regular author, you're writing something and it's all your own opinion. And when you're doing something in a co-authored way, with this, working with Dr. Gregory Stock to collaborate on this book was one of the gifts and joys of my entire life, because in a collaborative writing process, there's a lot of different things that you work through together. And Greg wanted to know the mindset of someone with a chronic illness and all of the different mindsets depending on the different types of symptoms that would come up. And so he asked me really interesting questions surrounding things I'd never spoken to anyone about. Like the idea of talking about throwing up in a public or private setting in any kind of conversation is something that the first 30 years of my life, I would have rather crawled in a hole and died. Seriously. Than said any of the things I just said today in a public setting. And that's really what was so interesting about the writing process is that he brought out stories. I would say something, and maybe it was a story from like 10 years ago. And he said, but what symptoms did you have yesterday? And how did you handle me? And asking things that allowed me to normalize the things that I was ashamed of. It allowed me to normalize the things that I had no control over or couldn't change anyway. Allowed me to see my own humanity and to love myself through what I experience in a way that I could have never seen coming. And so we always joke that the book has taken us many years to write, and we're so excited that so many people have said that the questions have helped them as well. But ultimately, the book writing process is something that, if all that ever came out of it was this level of healing and this level of ability to see myself and this level of ability to navigate symptoms without placing new stories and traumas on them, it would have been enough. And so, for anyone who's suffering at such a deep level, that's holding so much inside of them, as a result of all of these traumas that we all collectively experience and individually experience, there are things we can do. And so that is, it's a little bit about the behind the scenes of this book. If it only came out for me, it would have been enough. But now it's available for everyone, November 17th. The Book of
I
Witches.
love it. Everyone, go ahead and pre-order. Thank you so much, Brianna, and thank you for reminding us the power of being curious, the power of asking great questions and creating new mental models and mental frameworks. And so, for everyone listening, if something in this conversation resonated with you, don't just let it resonate, share it. Take the next step, order this book for you or for a friend, share this episode because there is so much value in normalizing being curious and asking great questions. So, thank you so much, Brianna. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And until next time, we appreciate the time that you're spending with us because time is your most valuable asset.